Okay. Oh, it's on. Yes. Welcome. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for coming. I'm delighted to see each and every one of you. It is an honor to be here with you tonight in community, and I recognize some old familiar faces, and that's really filling me with joy. So it's really wonderful to see you all. I wanted to mention a few housekeeping items. The first is the bathrooms are down the ramp to the lobby on the right. If you have to go, there they are. There's also an opportunity in the back of the room to express yourself, be a part of our community project that we're doing. There's 2 questions that we're encouraging as prompts for you to answer. One relates to Vermont values and how we can live those. The other relates to your hope for the future. And we plan to hang those, it's on, for those who are watching at home, it's kind of a clothesline with clothespins with scraps of paper. And we're going to hang that under our sign at in our office so that people can be reminded of these things as we go about our work. So thank you for your participation in that. As you've noticed, there is media here tonight. Orca is here tonight. I wanted to flag that for folks in the room. Tonight we're going to spend most of our time hearing from you, and I'm really looking forward to that. But what the evening will look like is I will begin by giving some remarks and also updates and kind of background on all of the cases that we have brought against the Trump administration. We will then have about an hour for Q&A, and we have folks in the room from my office who will have microphones. We're going to try to limit our questions to 2 minutes to allow for as many questions as folks have in the room. We have to leave by 7. We have a sharp cutoff tonight, so we're going to try to stick to that and also be focused on the topics at hand. So it is very uplifting to be with you tonight, but make no mistake, we are certainly in dark and unsettling times, as you know. Our president is overturning norms, violating the Constitution and federal law. He's threatening countries who are friends. He's cozying up to countries who are our adversaries. And he's destabilized the economy, and in some days, he's created a lot of problems with the stock market crashing. The common thread of all of his actions is hard to ignore, and that is a consolidation of power in the executive, in the president in himself. But this is America, and in this America, we believe in the rule of law. We believe in the 3 branches of government, in the sovereignty of the states like Vermont, and we believe in a separation of powers, because no man is above the law, and no man is a king in this country. Last November, I was re-elected Vermont's Attorney General, and that same night, I was called upon to be the very best leader I can be, because as Attorney General, I am the one with the power and responsibility to represent Vermont when the Trump administration violates the Constitution or federal law, and so far in not quite 2 months, I have had to sue 7 times. And every single time the Trump administration violates the law or the Constitution, I will be there for Vermont. Here's the thing. Vermonters elected Donald Trump to be president, and he has every right to install his vision for the country. However, he does not have the power to violate our Constitution or to violate federal laws. No one is above the law, not even the president, and as your Attorney General, I will continue to do my duty of fighting illegal and unconstitutional acts, no matter who is doing them. And I am very proud that because of the actions of myself and my fellow state attorneys general across the country, the birthright citizenship ban has been blocked. Thank you. The federal funding freeze has been blocked. Not quite a freeze, but it's sort of a freeze. The freeze of the NIH grants to research institutions in places like here, because of the University of Vermont, also has been blocked. Thank you. The plundering of Americans' data at the Department of Treasury by Elon Musk has been blocked. The illegal firing of federal employees in 18 different agencies has been blocked. And just last week, we sued to block the dismantling of the United States Department of Education. Yes. One of the reasons why I wanted to hold this town hall is to be able to give you background and updates on those cases that I have filed so far. So that's what I'm going to do, and I view these as rays of hope. It's fitting that we are in this beautiful space here in the pavilion, and there is sunlight streaming rays of hope through the window. I love that. The first case we sued occurred the very day after Donald Trump was inaugurated, and this is about birthright citizenship, a basic right that we as Americans are guaranteed by the 14th Amendment and the Immigration and Nationality Act. Both federal law and the Constitution make very clear that those who are born on U.S. soil and subject to the United States jurisdiction are citizens. The Trump administration's executive order attempts to strip this right away from babies based on their parents' immigration status, but this was already settled a whole long time ago by the United States Supreme Court. I think this bears dipping into a little bit. This case is famous. It's from the 1800s. It's known as Wong Kim Ark, which was the name of the man who was the subject of the case. He was born in San Francisco to Chinese parents, and he was out of the country, and when he came back into the country and tried to re-enter, immigration officials claimed that he could not be a citizen due to his heritage. The Supreme Court decided that the 14th Amendment grants citizenship to all babies born in this country and subject to our jurisdiction. It doesn't matter who your parents are. We all know this famous case from very, very long ago, and so we sued. And a federal judge who was appointed by Republican icon Ronald Reagan said in his 40 years on the bench it was the most unconstitutional thing he'd ever seen. This decision is now on appeal in the First Circuit. Okay, that was just the first case. There's a lot more to go, so buckle up. Number 2 was the following week. The next case came when the Trump administration tried to freeze federal funding, and you'll recall that sometimes we call this the OMB memo case because the Office of Management and Budget memo is where the funding freeze came from. And one reason we sued was a federal law called the Administrative Procedures Act, the APA, and you will hear that invoked many times because it is a favorite law that unfortunately Donald Trump likes to violate. Basically what it does, it instructs the federal government on how to conduct business. So the other cause in that case was based on what we all learned in grade school, that there's 3 branches of government. And it is Congress, the legislative branch, who gets to spend the taxpayers' money. The president has an administration, and they carry out the federal laws, and the court interprets the laws. Those are the 3 branches. But in this case, the president took an action that he has no constitutional authority to take. He cannot take power away from Congress and decide to simply stop spending the money that they had decided would be spent. We filed a lawsuit, we blocked this action from taking place, and it is currently sitting on appeal in the First Circuit as well. Number 3 was the Treasury Department. Have you blocked this one out, or are you remembering this one too? Recall that he announced that Elon Musk would be heading up an agency known as the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. And they immediately went after the Treasury Department and gained access to previously safeguarded data on nearly every American. These are confidential bank accounts and other private data that could make us, if not treated appropriately, vulnerable to identity theft. Well, my office knows a thing or two about identity theft because of our consumer assistance program. This was very concerning immediately, and again, a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act. It was also a violation of several laws related to data privacy. The people who were given access to the system simply did not have appropriate authorization to receive access, and they did not have appropriate training. Once again, a federal judge blocked this and ordered DOGE individuals who had gained access to documentation and materials to destroy them. The next step in this case is next week. The Treasury Department must explain to the court how it corrected this system. So we will be looking next week, I think it's on the 24th, for that update. The 4th case is the National Institutes of Health case, the NIH case. We had to sue once again when the president attempted to withhold, there's kind of a, it's not quite freezing, but it's similar to freezing, federal funds granted by the NIH. And of course, our wonderful University of Vermont is a recipient to this and amounts to millions of dollars, excuse me. And again, this was a violation of the Administrative Procedures Act. So it also violated regulations and statutes passed by Congress, ironically, during the first Trump administration. We've untangled this, presented to the court, and again, this was blocked by a federal court, allowing the millions of dollars to come into Vermont as they were supposed to be directed. This case is also ongoing. Okay, I know you're getting weary, but we're only on number 5. This case involves Elon Musk. We had to sue because Elon Musk, under the Appointments Clause in the Constitution, was not an appropriate person to be an official doing what he was doing. He was exercising the powers of an officer of the United States without being properly appointed to the post. That case is currently in discovery, meaning we're gathering documents and information about what Elon Musk is really doing, and we'll determine whether it's appropriate to file a motion for preliminary injunction to block his work, and our deadline for that is in early to mid-April, so that's on the horizon. The 6th case is the mass firing of federal employees. We had to sue because, once again, there were violations of the Administrative Procedures Act. Mass layoff regulations require that certain procedural steps be taken place once there is a mass firing like this. This was an especially egregious example because these employees were probationary employees, meaning that they hadn't been in their positions for very long, and they were supposedly fired because they had performance problems, except they didn't have any performance problems, and many of them had evidence of that because they had their evaluations that said that they were doing a just fine or wonderful job. Once again, the court agreed with our view of the case and ordered these employees to be reinstated. This case also continues. Last but not least, just last week, we sued because the president is trying to dismantle the Department of Education. We sued because, once again, the Constitution was violated. You can't shut down an agency that Congress has approved, and you can't refuse to implement laws passed by Congress. The next steps is we are determining whether a motion for preliminary injunction to block this is also appropriate in the case. Wow. Anybody need a breath? I feel like I might. All of this is really a symbol that our system is working, because the Trump administration is, for the most part, complying with the orders. Sometimes it takes them a couple days. Sometimes they try to find a loophole, but eventually they've always complied. And I'll add that just today, Chief Justice Roberts of the United States Supreme Court called it inappropriate for President Trump to call for the impeachment of a judge who disagreed with the president. Folks, Justice Roberts on the side of the rule of law, this is good news. No judge takes kindly to the flagrant disregard of their orders and the three branches of government or the rule of law, and this is good news. Since the election in November, I have truly cherished opportunities like this one to be with Vermonters, whether it's at a rally, whether it's here, whether it's running into you on the street. And I have seen how deeply connected Vermonters are to their communities. I think that's why we are so motivated to stay informed and stay engaged. But I specifically have been truly blown away by the spontaneous outpouring of thanks and support my office has received. As you walked in tonight, you could see we actually compiled most of the thank you notes, some of which are actual cards that say thank you on them, like you get at Hallmark stores. And when you walk by, there they are on display. We have 2 boards. We couldn't fit them all on one anymore. And I just can't thank you enough for your support. It means so much to me, and especially my team, who is literally working nights, weekends, and holidays on all of this work. So thank you for noticing the work and for your own gratitude. I also want you to know that our lawsuits would not have been effective without you. Many people got in touch with our office either because you've been fired from your federal job or because the Trump administration's policies impacted you in some other way, and we were able to use this evidence in our lawsuits to demonstrate that the harm that Vermont was experiencing, and we're grateful to this, that you allowed us to be able to get the foothold, to be able to file the lawsuits, and we hope we continue that collaboration tonight and in the future. I want you to know that this moment is why I became a lawyer, why I am proud to serve Vermont, why I ran for Attorney General in the first place. I know that people are feeling scared or they're feeling anxious, and I completely understand that feeling of powerlessness. But in this moment, I don't feel powerless because as your Attorney General, I am the lucky person who gets to represent Vermont, and Vermont has a lot of power. Remember? Yes, we do. And remember that you too have power. In my office, we have been recalling the words of Judge Learned Hand. Yes, that is his real name, Judge Learned Hand. We all learned about him in law school. And he gave a speech in World War II, and he said, liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it. So keep liberty in your hearts. Exercise your fundamental rights and freedoms, speak up, attend a protest, petition your government, write op-eds to your local paper, support the free press, buy a banned book, organize a carload of friends to go volunteer for a candidate you support, because remember, the midterms are just around the corner. Send a note of support to someone fighting for something you care about. Don't buy from a corporation who doesn't share your values. Donate to a local organization doing good work in your community. If you feel yourself getting tired and starting to check out, give yourself a break, rest, and then get back out there. We are Vermonters, and that means we weather storms together, whether it be shoveling out your neighbor's car from a snowbank or mucking out their basement. We fought for bodily autonomy and our right to make our own private healthcare decisions. We fought for civil unions and for marriage equality. We abolished slavery and helped smuggle enslaved people north to freedom in Canada. We speak our minds and we try our best to do what's right. Let's keep living Vermont's values every single day. Do not despair. Our country is strong. It was designed to overcome a tyrant king. It was designed to be a government famously of the people, by the people, for the people, for you. There are several members of my staff in the room tonight, and I thank you so much for all of your incredible work. Some of them are a core group working very hard on these very issues, and I want to shout them out. Rob McDougall is my Deputy Attorney General. Amelia Vath, thank you. Yes. Amelia Vath, who's standing in the back, is my Outreach and Communications Coordinator. And I'm really tickled to tell you that the two lawyers who are doing all this work are here. They are John Rose, our Solicitor General. And sitting next to him, can't escape, is Brian Kane, the Deputy Solicitor General. I see many other people from my office in the room tonight. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing so that we can focus on all of this work fighting against the Trump administration and all of their many violations of the Constitution and federal law. I am looking forward to hearing from you tonight and answering your questions, hearing what's on your mind, but I want to say something that's important to say. Regardless of whether you're here to share your thoughts, your concerns, anxiety, questions, thanks, or even criticism or complaints, I want you to know I believe that what makes our state great and our country great is your engagement and our civic and civil conversations about the issues that face our country. Thank you very much for being here tonight. We have two people with microphones who are going to come to you if you have a question or something that you'd like to say. So here they are. We have one in the front, Amelia.
Since the Trump administration has shown its willful disregard for the law, I just wonder if you folks have any collectively as attorneys general.
Mike isn't working.
Mike isn't
Yeah.
working. Oh, I can hear.
Put it closer.
How's that? Check,
I
check,
don't think it's on.
check. That good?
Okay.
Again, since the Trump administration has shown a willful disregard for the law, and still, I mean, they've sent 2 airplanes with migrants away, even though they were told not to. They grabbed that Palestinian supporter kid out of Colombia and took him down to Louisiana on a no-knock warrant, and he's a green card holder, etc. I just wonder if collectively you attorneys general have any plans when he disregards any other orders that courts might offer. And another thing, some of the Freedom Caucus legislatures are saying that the executive trumps, no pun intended, trumps the judicial.
That's just wrong. They can say what they want, it doesn't make it right. So the question is, what do we do, the collective states attorneys general, if the Trump administration violates court orders? Well, they have so far, and we've had to file motions to enforce the court's orders, and that has worked. So we found that maybe they are foot dragging, or they're trying to say, oh no, this is a loophole in this order, but ultimately they've come in line. And I think it's really significant, which is why I cited it, that Justice Roberts said, you know, it is not appropriate. And I will also encourage you, if you Google, I think it was in December, he presented his annual report of his work in the court. And this year, he specifically addressed the issue of violating court orders. So he is an incredibly powerful man in the very important judicial branch of government. So I find comfort in that. Ultimately, our job is to use the courts. And keep in mind, the Trump administration is made of people. You know, we say the Trump administration, but these are individual lawyers going to court. Lawyers with licenses, lawyers who have to adhere to ethical rules. And ultimately, that is our avenue in our country. So that's what we're going to do. More questions?
Thank you. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll kiss it. Thank you for being a gatekeeper. People are so concerned, and I hear people checking out or whatever, and you know, I can't. And thank you for being that gatekeeper. I tell people we have gatekeepers. They're doing their work behind the scenes. They're just not loud. So thank you. The other thing I want to say is, looking around here tonight, I think Social Security is on everybody's mind. So can you tell us, are you prepared with your pen in hand to keep us safe?
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Am I on?
Yes.
I'd be interested in knowing if the attorneys general of any red states are part of this effort.
So far, no. But I have met many of the Republican attorneys general, and I have found them to be good people. I think, I'm not making excuses for them, I'm trying to show you my insight. I think this is a very uncomfortable, for some, maybe many, a very uncomfortable position. We have a president who has sort of one of his trademarks is he comes after his political opponents. If you cross him, he will come after you. I think, I can imagine, I shouldn't say I think, I can imagine their perspective of, well, the Democratic AGs have this in hand, the work is getting done, I don't need to risk my neck for this, and I'm sympathetic to that. However, I do think there's gonna come a point at someday where it's going to be a bridge too far, and even the Republicans are going to have to get involved because it's just gone too far. Yeah.
ABC, 1, thank you. Thank you and your team. B, my focus question has to do with Department of Education. The others, of course, are equally, perhaps equally as important, but I'm indescribably concerned about the attack of the Department of Education. If we look at our country, 60 to 64% of adults are illiterate already, down to the 6th grade level, according to research. At the same time, women who have powerful presence, education, continue to be abused in so many different ways. Most of the people in this room understand that. So my question, given that we are in Vermont, what is that motto? Freedom and unity. As we look at that in terms of freedom and unity, speaking to this devilish behavior, and I think that's accurate in descriptive stuff, in describing stuff that's going. Why, in your estimation, is the Department of Education such a target for these people who make the decisions and they know better? I believe that mamas brought them into this world and their mamas taught them right, but somehow along the level, they've strayed from that. And I close by saying, women power is powerful. For whatever reason, given my some 40 years here in Vermont and some 80 plus years on planet Earth, I do not see women stepping up to the plate and saying, blank, blank, no, we aren't going to take that anymore. Why attack the Department of Education? Thank you.
It is a good question. Yeah. I think what we're seeing, as I said in my remarks, is an effort to consolidate power within one branch of government. And when you look at once you ground the analysis in that idea, you see that all of the actions Donald Trump is taking do connect. Otherwise, it seems all over the place. And it's obviously very chaotic. And I've wondered to myself, does he even have a plan? Not that I don't think he has a definite plan, but he obviously has a theme. And I think that is the theme. The Department of Education is critically important to vulnerable people. And I also want to remind people that what we have seen is Donald Trump take an approach that ultimately is very ineffective, because he could probably dismantle the Department of Education if he were patient, because he has people in Congress who aren't willing to stand up to him, and they are in the majority. But he hasn't done that. Instead, he's done this unconstitutional, illegal thing. And that makes it easier to stop until we can get to the midterms, where we can hopefully take over Congress and prevent him from being able to do the thing he probably would be successful doing if only he followed the rules, but he doesn't think the rules apply to him. That is my quick and dirty analysis of the why, not related to our legal work, but that is my opinion on the why. Lots of questions.
I'm just curious to know if the attorneys general are going to work on the AID funding question.
We are analyzing every single act, every single executive order, everything that's being done, we are looking at and analyzing to see, well, two things. One, has there been a violation of a federal law or of the Constitution? And two, if there has, is the state of Vermont a party that even can sue? And that's called standing. Do we have standing to sue, or is it some other person, some other entity? And so we're looking at every single act. If we haven't sued, the reason why is because we are either waiting for more detail, or we're working on it, or we don't have standing, or there hasn't been a violation. That's some combination of that. But I can tell you, we are literally looking at every detail. I personally read multiple newspapers every day and try to stay up to date with podcasts and things like that. My news feed it's a lot of time every day that I'm spending getting up to speed, because it all happens so quickly and moves so quickly. I'm sure you're finding the exact same thing. We had more questions over, yeah.
Hi. I think it's great what you're doing, but I think suing isn't going to do anything, because while it's all going through the court system, Trump is pilfering every department, anything he gets his hands on. I've been to protests in and out of the state for the last month or so. Tesla is a maybe could stop Musk, but Trump is so threatened by anybody doing anything to Tesla. He told his attorney general last week, and Trump came out and is saying anybody protesting Tesla is considered a terrorist. So the group I was with on Saturday, we were discussing this. And a lot of people didn't even come, friends of people that were there, because they're now being afraid they're going to get arrested. And I think that's probably, he's miles ahead of us, Trump, and his thinking and Doge. And another thing, he, I think it was yesterday, there was 2 departments, and I can't think of the names, but actually there were the people inside the building were trying to hold the fort, and they couldn't because there were people with arms came in. There were armed people, and they called the DC police. The DC police came in. They couldn't do anything. So really, martial law and everything is starting now. Like I said, he's miles ahead of us. And I think the best place maybe to take him down first and Musk is Tesla, because Musk is Trump's bank right now. And if he gets, and he's dropped his stock here tremendously, and it's dropping here. But and once he starts arresting people, that because Hitler, it took like 53 days for him to take over, and I'm afraid more people don't start coming out to the street, they're going to be silenced.
Thank you for those comments. I will, as usual, Vermont, we are special, and I think probably everyone in this room would feel safe marching and protesting next door. And it's incumbent, I think, upon those who are moved to do so to show up and do that, because maybe there are places where people don't feel so safe, but we know we are safe.
Well, I didn't feel safe after hearing him say that. Neither did the 200 people I spoke with, about 30 of them are starting not to feel safe.
Yeah, people not feeling safe protesting.
He's going to do it, and I don't care if it's
Well, keep in mind, the law enforcement here most of it doesn't answer to Donald Trump. They answer to Governor Scott. He can't commandeer our law enforcement for his own ends. We have our law enforcement works for us to keep us safe. So keep that in mind too. There's infrastructure trouble. That's what Donald Trump and his nefarious plans are running up against, is infrastructure trouble. We have a sovereign state here when we have our own rights that I'm lucky enough to be a part of representing. I think we have more there's lots of questions.
My question comes from the background of being a lifelong educator. In our schools, many of our kids, Vermont has one of the highest incidence of childhood asthma, respiratory issues. And Trump is already making sounds about doing away with any environmental regs. So I'm curious what the AGs think about that.
Well, during the first Trump administration, we sued 62 times, and I think half of those lawsuits related to the environment. But of the 62 lawsuits, we prevailed 60 times. And And remember, you heard me talk a lot about the Administrative Procedures Act. A lot of the regulations related to the environment have a connection to the Administrative Procedures Act. That was invoked a lot in our lawsuits the first time around, and I think that I anticipate we'll have to use it again. I have, frankly, one of the surprises that I've had so far, I was expecting there to be more executive orders and more actions related to the environment, and we haven't seen that quite yet. He seems to be focused more on the dismantling of the government itself. But believe me, I am, as a 10th generation Vermonter and someone who hikes the Long Trail, the outdoors is incredibly important to me. Childhood asthma, I like to joke, first mom here in the pavilion, and I take all that very seriously, and we will be watching that particularly closely given how things went during the first Trump administration. Thanks for your question.
Thank you for what you're doing. It's encouraging to hear the various courts that have stayed some of these actions. But my question is, reading all the news feeds and the papers and everything, I don't read a lot that say the people on probation have gone back to their offices. In other words, is the money still flowing to the NIH? Are the people actually able to go back to their offices? Is something really happening? Are the stays effective?
So far, they have been. We just last night at 7 in the federal government firing case, we had a check-in, and we're as I like to joke, the molasses of justice moves slowly, and it just takes different steps. But the NIH grants, we haven't been told. We are in touch with people. We haven't been told that there is a problem. If someone knows of a problem of something, hey, the Attorney General got an order blocking this, and yet I'm still experiencing whatever the thing is, please contact my office because we'll want to hear about it. Frankly, that's part of what we did in one of the early cases. We had to file a motion to enforce, which I think I mentioned, and that's how we did that, is by Vermonters contacting our office. So if someone is experiencing that, please let us know so that we can slot into action with our fellow state attorneys general.
Hi. Can everyone hear me? Oh, yes. Hold it pretty close. All right. Thank you for all that you're doing. I have a question. We've been hearing, New York Times has been reporting on people being illegally deported from our country, those here without a legal status, but also those here with legal status, including, I think, New Hampshire, someone living in New Hampshire. And I'm wondering what role the Attorney General's office and honestly, our governor is going to play in protecting people who are part of our community from those actions.
Yeah, good question. Of course, there is a role for us to play, but it's smaller than with some of these other issues because immigration is a federal issue. However, one of the things that Donald Trump envisioned is that he would be commandeering the public safety officials here in Vermont to help him with his plan related to immigration. He cannot do that, and that's not going to happen. The other thing to keep in mind is we in Vermont have what's called a fair and impartial policing statute, and it directs each department to have a fair and impartial policing policy that lays out non-cooperation with immigration officials by public safety officials, because it is their job to keep us safe, and we want public safety to be focused on public safety and not a project of the federal government, which is immigration.
Thank you very much for the fine work and courageous work that you're doing. I have two kind of follow-up questions, more specifically the chronology. We hear that things are, you've said that several movements have been blocked. And how soon will that be heard? What's the next step? Will that be heard by the Supreme Court? And when might it be heard by the Supreme Court? And does it take being heard by the Supreme Court? Because we know that that doesn't happen overnight. And the other one would be, you said during the first Trump administration there were 60 instances. Could you speak a little bit more about what that meant and what happened because of that? And third one, do you feel safe? Because of the number of the increase that there's been over the last several years with people in Congress and other positions whose family have been threatened and so forth. Hopefully that you do. And if there's anything else that we can do to help you, to stay safe, hopefully you'll speak up. And I have great trust in our law enforcement here. Wish you the very best.
Thank you. I've studied snow tires, so I always feel safe. I said I have studied snow tires, so I always feel safe. So I mentioned the first two cases I mentioned, which were the earliest cases we brought. The federal government had appealed those to a next court, which is the circuit courts. So it's the regular courts, like we have the District of Vermont, and then it's the circuit court. After the circuit court is the Supreme Court. So right now, those are being appealed to the First Circuit. The First Circuit is like Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, probably somebody else. And who? No? Maine. I forgot about Maine. How could I? And so that's the First Circuit, and we'll wait to see what the First Circuit Court of Appeals has to say. And if they say, we agree with the lower court judge, well, the federal government has a right to appeal to the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court, and then we'll see what happens. So that's the procedure that those are on. The other cases which are a little bit farther, they're not as far along, they're later in time. Maybe there will be a portion that's appealed, but we haven't gotten there yet, so we're still waiting. Each one of these cases is kind of on a different path.
Before the midterms?
Yes. Yes.
How soon before the midterms?
Well, we don't know.
Like a few months?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I would guess it would be this year, depending on how complicated the issue is, but I think we'll have clarity this year. And unfortunately, we're going to have more cases too. So, that we know. More questions?
Yeah, thanks again. We really appreciate this. I was just curious how you think about combining forces with the other, presumably blue state attorneys general, and whether you think there's sort of like a critical mass necessary. Is that obviously if you have standing, maybe you go for it solo, but is there sort of a critical mass of number of states that helps the case?
For me, I mean, if Donald Trump's administration violated the Constitution or federal laws and I was the only attorney general who was willing to bring the case, I would bring the case, and I would have brought the case in all 7 of these cases, regardless of who joined me. It does make it very, a lighter load on the office because we are benefiting from the other big offices and we collaborate and kind of divide and conquer that way where different people are helping out. We always have to have a foothold for Vermont, so we're always putting together Vermont's perspective in the case, but the collaboration makes it so much easier. We have what's called a common interest agreement, so we work together in collaboration. Frankly, we do this a lot with Republican states too on various issues. Famously, the big tobacco case from 1998, since someone already referenced Social Security, I'm going to trust most of you remember that. 1998, across the country, state attorneys general banded together to sue the tobacco companies, and that was bipartisan. So we're kind of used to that model, and that's really what we've done here. And like I said, I won't be surprised if at some point there are Republicans who get involved because the behavior is so egregious.
Mostly, I just want to say thank you for the work you're doing. Let's get this microphone.
Yeah.
So, I'm a medical doctor, and I know what Trump is behaving like a toddler who's having a nonstop tantrum. What happened at the CDC was very fast and very devastating to the CDC. 60% of the people who work there have either master or doctorate level degrees. They can find other jobs. And I want to ask you a question that has to do with velocity.
Oh God, I didn't take physics. I'm bracing myself.
You can win all the cases you want, but they're Pyrrhic victories if the agency has already been devastated and their employees may not wait around for a judicial victory when Trump has, just wiped out the agency. And I'm wondering if there's been any strategizing within the judicial branch. I don't even know how the state versus Fed would deal with this. Since it sounds like a lot of this would theoretically end up at the Supreme Court. But can anything be done to really stop him until it gets to the Supreme Court? Because this is not working. The government is being eviscerated.
The pace, yes. Well,
anyway, thank you once again, because I wanted to ask.
It is my honor to do this work, but thank you for the acknowledgement. We share the dismay, of course, but we also know we have to focus on the things we can control, and this is what we can do. This is the power we have, and we have to trust the system. I mean, I believe in the system that Donald Trump is trying to violate, and I believe the system is going to work. So that's what I'm focused on, and when it comes to this, we are working very hard to be very quick. which is why we've pretty much sued the Trump administration once a week since he took office. And we'll continue to do that and focus on protecting as much as we possibly can. It was very helpful, to be honest, that Donald Trump, despite his denial, is clearly trying to put in place Project 2025, which was a many pages of a vision for America, because we could read that and then be prepared, and that has helped us move quickly, and we'll continue to try to move quickly. But I do share your dismay and concern.
I'm very dismayed and concerned about so many things. I do have a question for you, but my dad landed on Normandy Beach on D-Day, and he would roll over in his grave. He was wounded right outside a village in France that they were liberating, and he would roll over in his grave if he knew that the U.S. voted with Russia against our allies in the UN. I was an educator for all my career. Through the Department of Education, I started in a classroom, worked in the Department of Education, actually worked with the Governor's Highway Safety Program with a grant from the National Highways Traffic Safety Administration. And I know firsthand that the grants are handled very carefully. I had to be accountable for every penny, literally every penny that I spent. I had to have receipts. I had to show that I met my goals and objectives to get reimbursed by the feds for the work that I had done. Possibly there has been a lot of waste and abuse since then. I've been retired for a while, but I just can't imagine that it has changed that much. I want to address the gentleman over here about the education department, but the diversity, equity, and inclusion dismantling of the work that my grandmother marched as a suffragette in Philadelphia. I was around when women's rights were, and the woman's rights to have an abortion, and helped protest, and just to see all these things just disappearing so quickly, it's like your head spins. Every day it's something else. The dismantling of the civil rights of people of color, of women, is just mind-boggling. And today, and I didn't research it enough, but I saw a headline that he today reversed a law that was passed in 63 or 64 about segregation, and that he has stated that all federal agencies will now be able to have segregation in their agencies. I don't know what that means, but it's just so scary to see this go.
Yes.
The education department, I really believe, this is just my opinion, that privatization of so many of the services that the federal government has provided for all Americans, that privatization is the big fruit that they're trying to pick. And education is a threat to them, because they don't want an educated public. They want a public that doesn't know the true history of this country. I lived in Florida for a few years part-time, and I saw what they're doing with the history books down there, and the banning of children's books in a classroom library. They don't want people to say the word gay. It's just also reminiscent of the Handmaid's Tale. It's like, it's scary.
Yeah.
My question to you is there anything that the AGs are doing about the diversity, equity, and education assault that is happening?
So, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I don't think people in this room have ever been threatened by that. And I have found myself explaining to people who are more sympathetic to Trump's point of view, it is already illegal to discriminate against white men. They're included when we talk about anti-discrimination work. They're there too. And I think people are astonished to learn that. So there's this misinformation campaign about what DEI means. DEI, of course, means we're gonna try to remove bias so that the best person gets the job or whatever. So I really believe in those programs, which are completely legal. We joined with other AGs in putting out a guidance for people who are feeling uneasy right now about that. And you can get that on our website. We have a whole page. If you go to the website, there's an American flag, and you can click on that and get all of our cases, our amicus briefs, our friend of the court briefs, and then the different statements that we've done. So you can get it there if you're interested. So that's what I want to say about DEI and the education department, where I just referenced that, but you spoke so eloquently about so many issues. Thank you. I share your concern. It is very unnerving to see Donald Trump's his chaos, the impact that he's having on vulnerable people and on our systems, and it is happening very quickly. I think it's important to remember that we have filed these lawsuits, and we're winning. We're getting orders in place. For others, we haven't quite gotten to file an order, but that probably will happen eventually, or we'll get more information and the case will continue. So just focus on the positive things that we can be doing and making sure we're not missing any opportunities. But it's really easy to get overwhelmed, and this is going to be a long fight.
Hi, Charity.
Hi, Tim.
And thanks all of you doing this great work. My question is political because we have talked a little bit about the elections coming up in 2 years, but I just Googled this, and I don't know if everybody in this room knows, of the 50 states, there are 7 AGs who are not elected. They're appointed by governors, and it looks like you are the only 2-year
That's true.
term in the country.
Don't I know it?
So the problem, because we've talked about, we know that we can act in the next 2 years to affect the legislative branch federally, but what about the judiciary? Are all of those 4-year terms, are you the only person on the ballot next 2 years, or are some of those staggered?
It's funny that you should mention that. There is an attorney general's race happening this year, and it is in Virginia, a purple state. When I first became chief of staff at the AG's office and would go to conferences, I would meet the Democratic attorney general, and now there's a Republican attorney general there. So that race is happening this year. Next year, there's a ton of people up. You're right, the 4-year term is up. Sometimes in other states, they have term limits too, so there'll be an open seat coming up, and we'll have some of those as well. But that is a really good question. There's a purple race happening in an AG's race this year in a purple state. Hi.
We're all looking forward to the midterm elections. I think we can agree.
Yes.
How do we make sure they're safe? We have Elon Musk, who has money, he has technology, he has staff. How do we know that our election for this country remains safe?
That is a great question. We are so fortunate in Vermont to have a wonderful, dedicated Secretary of State in Sarah Copenhansis, who cares so much about this, and I feel like an imposter even speaking to this issue because she's so eloquent about it. But there are groups who organize, I know this because I have friends who are lawyers who volunteer with those groups to make sure that elections are safe. Also, our system here is very safe. Everyone, I'm sure you know your town clerk. The town clerks know everything about your town. And I'm sure some of you in this room are justices of the peace like I am and probably worked on town meeting like I did. I think getting involved yourself is important, staying educated is important. Other than that, I would say go visit the Secretary of State's website. I'm sure that there's lots of good information there that can help give you ideas for what to do. And especially, don't be afraid, whether it be this issue or the midterm elections, to volunteer or get involved in another state. You know, that is okay. If you want to adopt a race, that's going to be your race in some other state, and you're going to help and volunteer and do what you can. There are several that I know of organizations that can help you volunteer in that way, and that's a good way to be able to do something in a place where, you know, we kind of know probably who will likely win our congressional race next year, and we love her, so that's a good thing to do. Find another state to kind of adopt.
Hi, Charity. Tanya Kristen, Executive Director, Green Mountain United Way, here representing the women, I want to say, of the nonprofit work in our lovely state. The confusion or the concern from where I sit with nonprofit partners is the intertwining of the DEI initiative with federal funding and the freezing of those funds. What we have already started seeing happening is the scrubbing of websites, the scrubbing of grant applications, and having to make that choice of, do we make a stand of what we believe in as Vermonters and as people for equity in all people in the work that we do, or do we, quote, abide by what these federal requirements are asking us to do now for grant and funding applications? What is the course of the law? I fully agree, the law is our best bet right now, but how do you begin to dismantle DEI and moral justice from federal funding that has been granted through Congress? Because to me, it's getting very intertwined in a very confusing way and making people feel with their backs against the wall, I have to make an ethical choice to ensure that my agency continues to do the work. And we're talking about mental health, we're talking about housing, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about all of the essential services that vulnerable and beyond in our working families depend on. Where's the pathway for the law to intersect this and make sure that these funds are granted and received and continued?
Right. And that is something, you know, I don't want to choose for you or for the nonprofits that are affiliated, but I will say there's that, you know, foundational beginning of do not comply in advance. And if we know that there's a violation, it could be this is the moment where people have to stand up and say, okay, well, I'm going to be the one to sue you this time because that is not right and you violated my law. The law or the Constitution, I'm entitled to these funds. And nonprofits have sued, and so we may have to see more of that going forward. But I want to sympathize because that is such a terrible place. You know, you want to do the services that you're supposed to be doing, but at the same time, you want to stand up for our system. And it is. I'm very sympathetic to that. I think it is really difficult choice. But I would just encourage you to remember that instruction of do not comply in advance.
Hello. I wanted to add a couple of comments before I made my own statement, but to add in a bit of context to some of the things we've heard earlier, the agency that was brought in that was invaded by the DOJ personnel just recently was the Institute of Peace, which is a separate organization than a federal one, meaning that was an enormous overreach. And to add further context, when the DC police were called, those DC police responded by opening the doors for them. They did not defend those of that office. To add further into the context of the individual who disappeared out of Massachusetts, that was a permanent resident, someone out of Germany who had permanent resident here, had wife, kids, that whole situation. He was detained for 10 days without medication, without his food, without any sort of resources, with no charges filed. This is the current state that we're in, and I, as a queer individual, am currently in a state that it is unknown if I'm allowed to pass back out of the Canadian border and return, or whether I'll be detained or my passport confiscated. In terms of what I'm asking, what is the plan for when they are not complying? Because we're seeing that already in terms of the blatant spit in the face of the justice system with the claims of some 250 individuals who were illegally told as being deported, but were instead not sent back to Venezuela, but to El Salvador for a labor camp. This is an uncharted level of fascism in this country, and a much bigger problem than I think a lot of people realize, because many of this, with the backing of Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, billionaire backers, this is being suppressed and removed. The New York Times is not going to report with that level of honesty. They won't. The Washington Post won't be known by Bezos. What's the plan for when they're not complying? Because they're already doing that, and it's going to get worse.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'm sorry that you're carrying an extra burden than some of us, and I want you to know you matter. The plan for me as the Attorney General is to use the courts. Everyone has a role to play. That's my role. Other people, I mean, I protest too, but other people have a different role. It could be protesting. It could be bringing your own lawsuit. Whatever it is, we need to commit to doing it. But my role as a lawyer, as the Attorney General, is to go to court. That's what we're going to keep doing, and we have done, and it has been successful, although I do admit sometimes it takes a few days. But that's what we've done, and we've gone back when there's been a violation, and we'll continue to do that. And we have those resources at our disposal, and I was very heartened to hear the Supreme Court Justice, the Chief Justice, say what he said today, and I think I'll continue to watch for his words, because I think that he's having none of it, and we'll continue to see his opinion be expressed if necessary. So that gave me a lot of hope.
So again, like everybody has expressed, thank you, and thank you to the courts, because it feels like right now that's where we can make a difference. I just want to say to, the community, the queer, gay, lesbian community, that we need to stand strong for everybody. I grew up in Europe, and I know that's how it started, but you heard it. First they came for, whatever, and there was no one left to speak for me. So I say we stand strong, and we don't. This is I'm not judging anyone. I'm just speaking from my heart that we need to stand together. But I have a question, and I don't know if this is anything, if it falls on your table at all, but the grift and corruption that we see is just mind-boggling. The president hawking Teslas on the White House lawn. Musk, in spite of the FAA awarding a $2.4 billion contract to Verizon, is telling his people to install Starlink. I mean, Jesus, it's highway robbery. So again, I don't want to put this at your feet if Vermont doesn't have standing in this, which we may not, but I just wanted your thoughts on who can do something about this. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll reflect back and say it does feel very grubby to have our president involved with meme coins and selling cars on the State House lawn.
Could you help me understand how, was it yesterday, $1.5 million was then taken away from a possibility of Vermont farmers who are growing food for the Vermont Food Bank? What's going to happen and how soon? And this is a tremendous hit, and it's a real hit. So where are we at judicially as far as this is concerned? Is this really going to kick in, and how soon? This is growing season we're coming on to here. What can be done?
I think we already have taken steps. I'm waiting for a nod from my friends here. Yes, I'm getting a nod. So yeah, we're on it.
What does that mean?
I don't want to say too much because I might.
Can they actually take the money away? Is it gone?
When we're looking at something, we keep it confidential, so I don't want to say too much, but I want you to know we're looking at that, and it's been on our radar. So to reassure you, yes.
Thank you for all the work your team is doing. I appreciate it as well. You said that eventually there'll be a bridge too far, and you also said that the molasses of justice, and I think Mayor Garland kind of dragged his feet a little bit with the insurrection. That should have been a bridge too far for a lot of folks, and it wasn't. And the Biden administration had 4 years to deal with that, and we're paying the consequences of that now. And I'm glad you mentioned Project 2025 because that is the plan he's going to. You know, you mentioned Trump doesn't have his own plan, and he did say he didn't know anything about it during the campaign. Obviously false, you know. You know, 34 felony convictions, 118 indictments, 2 impeachments, right? I think it's optimistic to think there won't be a bridge too far.
Yeah.
You know, Kevin McCarthy, the House Speaker at the time, during the insurrection, right, was on hot mic or whatnot. The first week, Mitch McConnell the first week, saying it was ridiculous. The second week, they're all on board with it, you know. It's just frustrating, I guess, is my point.
Yes. Did you have a question?
There was one coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. We're unlocking the iPhone, I think. Okay.
Democracy Forward and Sky Perryman, she's talked about having Project 2025 on her radar as well and using that for her lawsuits. One of my questions would be, have you talked to that outfit, or is there other independent, non-AGs who you are working with around the country?
Yes, we have lots of like-minded friends across the country, and we have actually joined through amicus briefs many lawsuits. And an amicus brief is like another brief. We're not a party to the case, but we file a brief saying, hey, this impacts Vermont. This is why it matters to us, and we kind of get to express our opinion to the court. And we've joined many of those, and in fact wrote one regarding transgender in the military ourselves. And you can find those on our website. There's links to all of them and press releases in some cases related to them.
He's also talking about, President Trump's talking about voiding President Biden's pardons, Liz Cheney and other folks.
Yes.
There's been an executive order against law firm Perkin and Coie, if I'm pronouncing that right, about retribution, about the Russian dossier.
Very disturbing.
These things that are on your radar?
Oh yeah, we joined on that one. I will say something about Donald Trump. Now this is on brand for him, so I'm not rocking your world here, but he says a lot of stuff that isn't true, right? and that includes, he just says things that aren't going to happen. They're not even in an executive order, or I mean, there's executive orders that don't do anything. I was frankly surprised because we were expecting shock and awe, and we got a lot of executive orders. But one of the reasons why we only brought one lawsuit right away is because a lot of the executive orders literally were just like bloviating and didn't do anything. Some of them said, "This is what I want. Hey, agency of such and such or department of such and so, please give me a recommendation about this." And we're watching that. We're waiting for the recommendation from that department or that agency. But setting that aside, I mean, a lot of what he says, he can say that doesn't make it true. And we have to keep that in mind too. He's trying to scare us. You know, he's trying to unnerve us and offend us, and it doesn't necessarily make it true, or it doesn't necessarily mean that something's going to happen. But we are paying attention to everything. So I want to reassure you, we are listening and analyzing each thing.
Just a little bit.
Sure.
You know, Steve Bannon calls that flooding the zone, muzzle velocity, right?
Yes.
Putting enough stuff out there, something
Yeah.
stick, you know?
Yep.
And all the lies work for his voters, you know?
I know.
It's part of the propaganda and the fear-mongering playbook that is working.
I
You know,
know.
and I'll end with I do appreciate your work on
It's
this.
my pleasure. One of the things I think that as like a middle-aged person, I find so unnerving is the loss of newspapers and media. And we see it obviously in Vermont, but I'm so concerned that people aren't getting accurate news because they're just listening to podcasts, which I view as, I listen to podcasts too, I love them. But if I'm not hearing direct from the source, it's an opinion, it's not news. And I think talking about that, supporting local newspapers we have here in Vermont and news outlets, I think is really important for us to do, because that's how we see different points of view. I subscribe to newspaper, and my office subscribes to newspapers that are much more conservative than I am and more liberal than I am. And I like that because I get different viewpoints, and I think it makes me a more informed person and a better leader. We have time for more questions. If there are questions.
Can you hear me?
Kind of. Keep talking.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much for all the work you're doing. My question is related to reproductive freedom, and for right now, we're protected in Vermont, but I do worry that Trump could try to sign a nationwide abortion ban or use the Comstock Doc to block medications use for women's health. Could you just discuss what plans you guys have if it comes to that?
A nationwide ban, get your pitchfork. That is outrageous. We will be protesting in the streets. When it comes to the Comstock Act, which is this ancient act of days of yore, we are looking at that as well. I want to reassure you, we're all over that. My fellow state attorneys general and I. So that is very, very, very much on our mind. And probably everyone in this room has heard this, but it bears repeating. In every single town in Vermont, a majority of residents voted to enshrine the right to abortion in our Constitution. Not one town had a majority of its residents say no thanks. So we are very clear here in Vermont on our opinion. Doesn't matter if you voted for Trump or not, you still think that we should all have reproductive liberty. So this is extremely offensive to consider that on the national level, there might be some action that would jeopardize that freedom. And we already have sued under the Biden administration to preserve access to the abortion drug mifepristone. And we will, my job couldn't be easier because it's so clear. We will always, always, always do everything we can to stand up for a right to abortion and a right to reproductive liberty.
Thank you. Back to the NIH. When I hear that colleges and universities are not hiring, I have a personal connection to that. A family member who was about to sign papers to work at Dartmouth, moved to Vermont, and they're stuck in Portland, Oregon still, because the very same day they were going to sign it was when Dartmouth said we're not hiring. So is that anticipatory compliance that these universities are doing? I know it's millions of dollars all over the country and UVM, but shouldn't they be saying forget it? Can't they? Anyway, could you speak to that, please?
It is really concerning. I don't want to speak for them. You know, they get to choose. Obviously, I have an appetite for a fight. That's why I'm a lawyer. So I would always stand up and fight. That's just who I am. And, you know, we have to respect that they're making these choices. Frankly, I have wondered if people are anticipating the economy struggling and the stock market crashing, because if you look at the trajectory and they're thinking we have to batten down the hatches because who knows what's going to happen with this crazy economy with tariffs and cryptocurrency and the nonsense that's happening, that could be a part of the calculation as well. So unfortunately, we have to keep that on our radar.
With your permission, I'd like to lift up the 2 F words and a 4-letter word. Fear, faith, and love. There is fear among many of us, outside and inside Vermont in particular. Fear, yet whenever there is a tragedy, whether it's a flood, snowstorm, etc., homicide, people run to the church or the fear factor or the fear community and lift up each other, reminding us there's a better day coming, but it involves all of us utilizing our strength in a collective manner. We talk about the structures such as professional laws and ordinances and amendments to the Constitution, but it comes down to relationships beyond, the color and gender and that stuff. It comes down to relationships, and right now that fear needs to be addressed, not with guns and things of that sort. Because it trickles down, it destroys people, it destroys neighbors, it destroys our kids. The kids pick up that spirit of meanness that's out here, and they are looking around for that strength that comes with having faith. I'm not saying denominations, that you should be a Catholic or you should be a Protestant or you have to be a Muslim. No, I'm talking about that faith as a human thing that keeps kids from shooting up and OD and all of that kind of stuff. And that trickle-down stuff that's coming out of Washington right now is intentional. And that intentionality destroys heartaches, heart attacks. So when we speak, I would encourage us to remember that faith factor. My guess is everybody in this room has some kind of currency or coin in their pocket. It says, in God we trust. Yet, across our state, there's a strong 30% pushback against people like me who might stand up and say, wait, love your neighbor. 30% pushback against churches and organized religion. So faith factor, I would lift up. And finally, that four-letter word, I'm not talking about the sex commercials that we see on TV, but I am talking about love. L-O-V-E. We stand up, we demonstrate it, it makes a difference. It is a power that is uncontrollable in terms of having to make a difference. What did King say? He said, don't talk about my degrees and so on and so forth, but remember that I tried to, what? Love somebody. And Washington has a problem with that. All three of those. If they saw that in a collective fashion coming to them after our tax dollars have paid their salaries, they become fearful. Some people have a big problem with truth. And I submit that a significant part of truth is about overcoming the fear with faith. Faith. We can do it. I have no problems with that. When the KKK and I were both born in the state of Tennessee, and when they came to kill my grandfather, there was a group within, group of black folk and white folk in the Haywood County who came together and stopped vigilantes when they started down the lane to kill my grandfather. And I'm going to shut up, she says so. The black folk and the white folk came together and they stopped the vigilantes because they had a faith factor, respect for what he put out there. We have power. We can do it. Just claim it. Get rid of that denial stuff that gets in the way of everybody in the generations to come. Think about it. I would ask you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Hi. I'm a doctor who serves this community, and in 2021 I had the privilege of feeling comfortable enough of finally coming out as trans. A lot of people aren't aware of the fact that the infamous picture of Nazis burning books was the Department of Sexology. That was a German transgender and women's sex institute researching the health of individuals in that community. As you said, he's following very much the playbook of 2025. And one of the first things he's doing is doing the digital equivalent of book burning. He's removing all mentions of transgender individuals from history, from health. He's put a ban on any further health and medical research into transgender healthcare issues. And it's kind of terrifying. Looking ahead at 2025, they don't want me to be here or be public. So I guess not really a question. I just hope to still be here.
You will be. We see you. And can I say something really important that we have to remember, because we do see the fascism, and more than one person has referred to Nazi Germany. But just remember, we live in a gigantic country where there is federalism, and every state is a sovereign state with its own power, just like Vermont has. And there are many states who see things the way Vermont sees things. We have all these checks and balances that were put in place. We have an independent judiciary, and we have sovereignty by all the states. We are a giant nation, and it's going to be very difficult. It would be very difficult, I think, to succeed. So we're going to keep trying and keep showing up. I'm giving you a big hug.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I hate public speaking, so this is really hard. My spouse and I are new to Vermont.
Welcome.
Thank you. We moved here in the fall, and my question has to do with this may not be your primary thing, but as a state official, I figure I'd ask. Is the state of Vermont preparing for the impact of cuts coming down the road, both in terms of budget, I'm thinking mostly Medicaid, and the impact that's going to have on people in the state, and what I think the state's going to need to pick up the slack to help people. And so is the state preparing to do that? One of the other things, and this might be just my own observation that doesn't mean anything, but when we moved here in the fall, one of the things we thought was great about Montpelier is walking around town here in French and seeing a whole bunch of Quebec license plates around. And we just got back from a winter escape to California, and there are no license plates that I see. I don't hear French in town. Maybe it's a seasonal thing, but I know from my Canadian friends, they are not coming across this border. And so it's not just the budget stuff, but it's the impact of the other things like the tariffs and the rhetoric, that he's spewing towards Canada mostly. That's got to have an impact in this community.
I think you're right, and I think it's funny that you're hearing from this from the Attorney General, but this is known as mud season. And it is not pretty, and I think the Canadians know it because they probably have a similar one and they're going to California too. That's my hunch. That being said, I think you're right. I think we are going to see fewer visitors. I think the unnecessary antagonism that has been created from the White House to our friend and neighbor, especially to us. I mean, I feel like I learned French just by getting blueberries and things, that we know come from Quebec. It is really frustrating and hard, but I also think it's an opportunity for us to show up for our northern friends. We should be going to Canada if we feel comfortable doing so and spending our money. Yeah. And we should be welcoming them when they come. Thanks for coming, as we always would. So thank you for speaking up, even though you're not comfortable with public speaking. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. I'm happy you moved here, and I hope you had a great snowy winter, and mud season will be over and it'll be okay. Get a bike. Oh no. Wow, this was so uplifting and fun for me. Thank you so much for coming. I so appreciate your taking time out of your busy lives to come and hear me talk and to talk to me. We will all hear this and digest this. And thanks again for coming. And I'll linger if anyone has a follow-up question or something they weren't comfortable saying in front of everybody. Please participate in the community project. That was my idea, so I'm going to special ask you for that. So thank you.
Yes, I know. I recognize you. It's so good to see you.